panel discussion about the evening slot of CAT 25. Now, to help me in this panel discussion and to bring you insights across all the three sections of the CAT, we have two expert faculty members who will be with us this evening. And we have Shana ma'am from, who's the center director of our Indore and Bhopal centers. Shana ma'am will be helping us to get insights from the VRC section. And we will have Devin Mahajan, Senior Quant and LRDA faculty member from Mumbai, who will be joining us shortly. In fact, he's just coming in. And Devin sir will help us gain insights from the Quant and LRDI sections. All right. So, so without any further ado, let's quickly go to the experts and hear directly from them. All of us know that this is the structure. The structure of the exam has not changed, meaning 68 questions remained 68 questions, right? So therefore, what is it that we will just give us one moment, folks. "68 questions remained 68 questions. So compared to last year, where last year there was a surprise, 66 went up to 68. But this year, there was no change in terms of the overall number of questions. Overall composition also, there were no surprises, right? So therefore, what does this all mean for the students in terms of how is it that they could have done? How is it that they have done in the exam? So to learn about that, let's quickly go to Shana ma'am from who's based out of Bhopal, who will be telling us more about the VRC section. Ma'am, over to you.
Right. So the VRC section in slot 3, there were no surprises. Students who had familiarized themselves with the previous year's pattern would have not seen any surprises. We had the same 4 passages with 4 questions each. So 16 questions for RC and 8 questions of VA. 2 of the different standard varieties which we have seen earlier. There were 2 parajumbles. There were 2 questions which were odd man out. There were 2 summary based questions and there were 2 sentence placement questions. So in terms of the structure, it was pretty similar to the previous year. And as in the case of previous year, once again, the questions were jumbled. Like before 24, we used to see all the RC questions coming together, followed by VA questions. So that pattern had changed last year, and this year also the questions were mixed. It began with RC, then there were a few questions of VA in the middle, and then again it ended with an RC.
So the questions were jumbled. It is not like all RC questions came
all,
together
yes.
and then the VA questions. So that was first seen last year. You're saying that repeated this year too.
That's right.
Okay.
So so there was no other new surprise thrown up in terms of the pattern.
Okay.
Now talking about the difficulty level, or let me begin with the RCs. So all the RCs were, I would say, language-wise, a moderate difficulty level. If I talk about certain words that were used, they were fairly dense, and certain difficult words were used which had to be correctly understood for the students to come up with the right answer. So I would rate the language of the passages to be moderate to high difficulty level.
Any specific words, Shana ma'am?
For example, I think that one of the passages had a word messianic, MESSIANIC.
Okay.
And the interpretation of this word was very important to answer the questions. Then there was a few more words were like this, which would have been important to know the meanings of those words to get to the, because they were relevant for the questions, specific questions.
So contextually also understanding the meaning, even if the student did not know the word, did not come across the word earlier, that would have been difficult.
It would have been a little difficult, I think. I mean, obviously, if you don't know the meaning, you are going to try to get it from the context. But the question very specifically, one of the questions very specifically wanted the student to interpret this word messianic, for example, very properly. Then there was, just forgetting, there was one more such word, which again was asked directly in the question.
Okay, okay. So meaning the students were asked to give the meaning of the word in that
In the
context,
context of the
in the
passage, more or
context of the
less, yes,
passage.
more or
Okay,
less,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
that was it.
So which
The
means,
passages dealt with themes such as the environment, which almost in every cat recently there is always one passage dealing with the environment.
mm-hmm,
Then again, as it was expected, one passage did deal with artificial intelligence
mm-hmm.
and a very interesting take on whether artificial intelligence can be used to take moral decisions, moral judgments, something like that.
Okay, okay,
So then there was one passage which was about a social issue.
okay,
Uh, so two passages based on environment, one on artificial intelligence, and one was on a social issue.
okay,
So overall, they were not passages where there were a lot of factual questions. There were plenty of inference based, argument based questions. Frequently, the question type was which of them will weaken the arguments presented in the passage. And there
okay.
were twists, like one of the questions would say, all of the following would weaken the argument except.
Except,
The
okay,
student had to read the question very carefully.
okay.
And in some of the questions, admittedly, the options were easy to eliminate.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of them, the options were also quite close. So the RC I would rate at moderate to high difficulty level.
Which means, Shana ma'am, if I hear you correctly, when you said some of the questions were, they were options which were easy to eliminate. So would you say that there were easy questions overall in the
Yes.
RC passages?
There were a few easy questions. Like out of the 12, maybe there would be about three or four which could be called as easy. Of course, you had to read the full passage, but
Okay.
still the options were not terribly close.
Okay, now that you mentioned reading the passage, was it possible for the students to have not read the passage but skimmed through the passage and answer the questions?
Not really. I don't think it is advisable, and I don't think there was. I mean, it would have been a matter of just tossing a coin if you would want to go ahead and attempt the questions without reading the passage. Certainly, the passages should have been read very carefully because the arguments were fairly dense. It
Okay, so
wasn't, none of
which
them
means
were like a scientific or purely fact-based kind of a passage, I would say.
Okay, which means the advice that we keep giving to the students in terms of strategy in the exam is always to, as much as possible, unless you are in the last 3 4 minutes where
Yes,
you don't have anything else to do, but there is this RC passage, only then try a skimming
only
approach. But
then.
otherwise, you make sure that you read the passage, only then go to the questions. Otherwise, you'll just simply end up losing time, wasting time, going back and forth, flitting between the passage and the question, and vice versa multiple times. So I think that kind
Absolutely.
of stands out
Yes.
clearly in this slot. All right, all right. So, any other information in terms of the lengths of the passages
It's
that you can
fairly
share?
standard. It was very fairly standard what we normally expect. They were not too lengthy, but as I said, the arguments were fairly dense. But I
Okay.
believe that if the students would have read the full passage in the first co itself extremely carefully,
Mm-hmm.
then there would not have been much need. Out of the 12 questions, there were probably four or five questions which could have been answered by simply reading and comprehending the entire passage. You would
Okay.
not have to revisit specific paragraphs.
Okay. In terms of density of reading or in terms of ease of
Yes.
reading, out of the four passages, how many would you classify as easy, moderate,
I
difficult?
would say that one passage which was based on a legal act passed in India about
Mm-hmm.
forests, that
Mm-hmm.
one was possibly still less dense and
Mm-hmm.
easy to read. The remaining passages were fairly dense. I mean, they
So
all,
just to mark your words carefully, just for the viewers, what ma'am said is one passage was possibly less dense. Ma'am
yeah.
did not say one passage was easy or moderate. Even
Well,
the
I
less
would,
dense,
yeah, I mean,
even the
nothing
less
was
dense
very, very
was
easy.
even the less dense was prefixed by a
Yes.
very carefully placed adjective, possibly, right?
I didn't find
Possibly,
any of them very easy.
which means the difficulty level just from a readability perspective of the RC pages is very, very high, folks. So
It
you
was
need to
quite.
understand that. Yeah. All right. All right. So Shana ma'am, moving on to the verbal ability questions. What is your take on those?
In verbal ability questions, if I talk about the summaries, for example, the summary based questions, they were pretty difficult, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
because the paragraph itself, although it was a short paragraph, which had to be then summarized,
Mm-hmm.
but options were very close in both of the summaries.
Okay.
So, as is usually the case, two options could have been easily eliminated, but the remaining two were really very close.
Okay.
Um, The sentence placement kind of questions, there were a couple of questions. One I would say was relatively easy. The
Okay.
other was difficult.
Okay.
And the para jumbles and odd one out, they were all, I would say, moderate to difficult level. I didn't find them to be very easy.
So
So
out of
yeah,
the 8 questions,
out
how
of the
many?
8, I would say that maybe there were 2 that were easy, but the remaining 6 would be moderate to high. So summaries were high difficulty level.
Summaries were also high. Okay, so 2 out of 6 were, let's say, would you say easy or easy to moderate? How would you kind of
Easy to moderate, I would say.
So there were no easy directly, so to say.
No,
They were not
not really.
easy, not
Not
really
true.
easy, but easy to moderate. So with some level of preparation, students would have cracked
Yes.
them, and those who would have put in a lot of effort would definitely have cracked them. That is
Yes.
basically, I think, how.
Good thing, yes, exactly. Because the good thing is that there was no surprise. We would have anticipated this kind of a CAT based on previous patterns. And so a student who would have prepared well should have a shot at a good score.
Okay, all right, all right. So thank you, Shana ma'am. Now we'll move on to Devin Mahajan sir from Mumbai, who will be sharing us inputs from the quant and LIDA sections both. But before we do that, we will have a student feedback video, which we'll bring to you in a while. And we'll then jump straight to Deven sir to get information or inputs from the quant section, from the LRDA section. Deven sir, what do you think? How do you think that the LRDA section was in today's CAT in the evening slot?
Good evening, everyone. Today's DILR section, the structure of the section was similar to CAT 24. There were no surprises in terms of the structure of the section. There were 22 questions distributed across 5 sets. There were 2 sets of 5 questions each and 3 sets with 4 questions each. Okay. But the similarity, I would say, ends over there. As far as the slot 3 DILR section is concerned, the difficulty level went up compared to last year. So
Okay.
compared to CAT 24, this year's DILR section overall was more difficult. And the students would have struggled if initially they panicked. If they looked at the DLR section, started with the more difficult sets, if they appeared first in their paper order, and that is what they looked at first, and then they panicked, then the entire section would have probably gone for a toss. So the students would have done well if they had calmly went through all the 5 sets, chosen 1 or 2 sets to attempt, and done only those. So
Okay.
that is how this section should have been tackled.
Okay, particularly those students who would have looked at what happened in slot 1 and slot 2, where particularly in slot 1, there was a definitely doable and a must attempt kind of a set, which was kind of not there that much in slot 2, and which seemed to have gone completely absent in slot 3. So would you agree with that, Deven sir, that there is no one set that we can pick and say, hey, this is doable in slot 3? Do you think there is such a set?
I would say there are 2 sets in this slot which should definitely not be done.
Not
Otherwise,
be done. Okay.
And
Okay.
the remaining 3, it depends upon the students' own comfort levels and what kind of DILR sets they have practiced.
Okay.
I would say there were 2 sets that probably would have been the first 2 to be attempted by the students. There were 2 sets that were present in this section that should have been tried.
What can you give us a brief description of these 2 sets?
One of those was based on a step graph. It was a DI set present in this section. So this set had a step graph that is given. There were puzzles that were solved by 4 students, and the data that was given was the time taken to solve the puzzle. So there were 10 puzzles, and for each student, at what time they complete a particular puzzle. So first puzzle they complete in how many minutes, second puzzle, and so on. And this way data was given for 4 students. So the data looked intimidating. So if the students just went on the basis of how the graph looked, then it would be something that they would have probably left. But if the students stuck with the graph, if they actually tabulated all the data, the questions were easy to solve. They were not difficult once a table was made after looking at the data on the graph. There was nothing really to calculate in this set. There was one question where average of a few numbers has to be calculated. That was it. The rest of all the questions were directly to be answered based on the table that was
So basically
made.
an observation based set. Would I be right if I call it that?
Yeah, it's not just something that you can observe from the graph. The graph looked complicated, but you need to tabulate the data that was present in the graph. And once the
Correct.
table was made, and there was nothing really to calculate in that table. So
Exactly,
it's just the
exactly.
values that were present in the graph that you have to put in a table form, and then
So,
the questions could be answered.
so observe, tabulate, and solve and answer, basically. Observe, tabulate, and answer. But to be able to get to the point of solving, one should not get intimidated by the way the set
Correct. The
presented.
graph that was present, it looked
Hmm.
intimidating because there were 4 students and there were 10 puzzles that were solved by the students. The graph looked challenging.
So
And there were two groups. There were
those
two
students
groups.
who got beyond that initial scare after looking at the graph and then persisted with that could have reaped the
Yeah.
benefits of
And
their persistence.
there,
All right.
there was slight additional complexity introduced because of 2 types of puzzles. There were 2 types of puzzles that were being solved by the students,
Okay.
numerical puzzles and visual puzzles. So there
Okay.
was a second graph also introduced. So
Okay.
that may have caused students to panic.
All right. What is the detail about the other set, which you
The
said was also maybe slightly doable?
other set that should have been attempted by students is the linear arrangement set.
Okay.
There was sorry, not linear, circular arrangement
Circular
set. There
arrangement.
were 7 students,
Mm-hmm.
7 persons who were sitting on a circular table,
Mm-hmm.
and they were playing a game
Uh-huh.
that was passing the buck. The game itself was named passing the buck,
Mm-hmm.
and there were 10 rounds in which the buck was passed around the students. So there was a table given for the 10 rounds. How many positions to the left or to the right the buck was passed. So
Okay.
whether it was passed to the second person to the left, or first person to the left, or second to the right, or first to the right. Those are the only 4 possibilities.
Okay.
And who received that buck after that particular round. So the
Okay.
names of the person. So that was another set that probably students would have attended. That those two were the doable
Were
sets.
there not too many movements which would have made the set complex? You said right, 2 times to the right, 2 times to the left. Would that not have added to the complexity and made the set difficult? Or was there anything kind of in the way the data was presented which has made the set, let's say, doable?
There were the person who started the game started with which person and ended with which person, that was given. So since
Okay.
we knew who had the
Okay.
buck initially, and
Mm-hmm.
step one we know whether it was
Mm-hmm.
passed to the right or to the left or whatever, and who
Okay.
had the buck after that first step is done. The circular arrangement could be built up from there. So we could
Okay.
start with that first person who had the buck initially, and then according to the steps that were given, the 10 rounds, the
So in
arrangement
terms
could
of
be built up. There
okay,
were
in
only a
terms of
couple of, yeah, go ahead.
in terms of making or looking attemptable to the students, would this not have looked more attemptable because this kind of is a circular arrangement that is there? So because students may in general be kind of more comfortable with the circular arrangement question than any other LRDI set, so to say,
Correct.
would do you think students would have attempted this set more?
Yes, yes, that would be one of the reasons that students would have been attracted towards this set.
Okay.
Students generally prefer to do arrangements-based puzzles
Okay.
over quant-based reasoning,
Right.
and the remaining 3 sets were all quant-based reasoning. That is why
Oh,
these 2 sets would have been the ones that students would have picked to do the
okay.
stepwise graph and the circular arrangement.
Okay. Okay. All right. So overall, Devan sir, you say that there were two kind of doable sets which were definitely not easy, but compared
Yeah,
to the other three
compared
sets,
to this.
because I clearly remember you saying that there were two sets which definitely should not have been attempted. So by extension, that doesn't mean that the remaining 3 sets should be attempted. The other 3 sets could potentially be looked at. 2 out of the 3, not all 3, by the way, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So let's now move on to the quant section. So what is your take on the quant section?
Quant section, again, in terms of the structure of the section, there were no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
There were total 22 questions, same as last year.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in terms of distribution of topics that were tested, it was again on the expected lines. There were more number of questions from arithmetic and algebra, and lesser questions from the remaining topics. There were some questions of geometry present this time. 3 questions of geometry were asked. Couple of
Mm-hmm.
numbers questions were there. 3 to 4 numbers based questions were there. There was
Mm-hmm.
one Venn diagrams based question also asked this time. Nothing
Okay.
from PNC probability. So in terms
Okay.
of topics tested, not much of a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of difficulty level now of the questions, there were very few questions that could have been considered as easy.
Oh,
Whatever could be considered as easy were also lengthy.
okay.
Very few, maybe 2 questions also that I can say are easy to solve concept wise as well as in terms of time taking.
Okay. So,
Rest of the questions.
overall, in terms of the easy questions per se, you say that there is a drastic. So, compared to last year's, let's say slot 3 or last year's, any of the slots, you think the number of easy questions has dropped in this section?
Yes, it has.
It has.
Questions that were easy in terms of both concept tested as well as in terms of the time taken to solve. When you consider both those parameters, the number of such questions present were very few. Just a couple of such questions were present. There were some questions that were doable, but it would take a lot of time. There were
Okay.
some questions that probably would have required calculator usage on the quant section.
Okay.
So calculator-based questions, also calculation-oriented questions were present on the quant section.
So, because they were calculation-oriented questions, would you think those who practice speed maths well would have had an advantage? Would have saved some
Absolutely,
time?
yes. Speed maths
Absolutely.
would have been advantageous if students would have attempted the DILR set, which was based on percentages. There was one percentage based difficult DILR set that should not have been attempted by students, but if they had, then
Okay.
the speed maths techniques would have been beneficial, as well as in quant. There were quant also many questions where calculations were present.
How many questions, Devin sir, would you say, let's approximately, would you say that required calculations, where speed maths could have helped? Roughly,
Maybe 3 questions. Three
3 questions.
questions where, yeah, multiplication techniques would have definitely helped students.
Okay. So 3 questions here and around
And yes, percentage
four
based
to five
calculations
questions
also.
in
3 to 5.
DLR. So that means some 7 to 8, or even if you say if you want to go to a sort of slightly lower level, 6 to 8 questions would have is the number of questions where speed maths, being good on speed maths, would have helped. So for those of you who are watching this video with CAT 26 or beyond in mind, please make sure that speed maths is not an area that you can neglect, because that is not a topic that would come and stand in front of you and beg you to study it, unlike some other topics like, let's say, geometry or numbers, because such topics get our attention first. So we kind of pamper them. They are our most loved kids, so to say, but we kind of tend to neglect speed maths. I think what the insight that we are getting from the evening slot, both quant and LRDI, is that speed maths is an area that should not be neglected. And one more point to share with you, both Devin sir and Shana ma'am, is that in the afternoon slot, 2 sets from LRDI are straight from our aimcats. aimcat 15 this year and aimcat 14 this year. Exactly similar sets were seen in the afternoon slot. And in the evening slot, there was one question, the the passing question which you just mentioned earlier. A very similar question we had in our aimcats this year too. They have combined it with circular arrangement. Here we had just the passing game, right? So very similar questions we have had, and once the response sheets are out, then we will be able to come out with the exact number of questions that are there in our material. So those of, particularly in the afternoon slot, 2 full sets in LRDI, that would mean that the student would go straight and sit at 95 percentile or more. Had the student practiced these in the aimcats, attempted these, analyzed these, and practiced these in the aimcats, straight away the student would be sitting at 95 percentile through these 2 sets, and anything after that that he or she gets would be a bonus, right? So that is how important it is to take aimcats regularly, analyze them, study them, and make sure that you push your percentiles up. Any other insights from quant, Devin sir?
In terms of quant, again, the key point for the students would be to not panic looking at the questions that are present. They should calmly go through all the questions that are present on the section, choose maybe 6 to 7 questions that are doable, and should have attempted those. The students who did that would have done pretty well on this quant section. This section overall was a difficult paper. It was a difficult section. So getting 6 to 7 questions correctly done would be enough to get a good score, good percentage.
Okay. So one thing, folks, that you
Can
need
I
to
also add a point for quant? I know it's Devin sir's area.
no
Can I
problem.
please
Please.
add some? Before the exam, many students feed on some social media misinformation they go by which IIM is setting the paper, and they make certain conclusions that this IIM traditionally, especially for quant, this IIM makes easy quant papers, this IIM makes difficult quant papers. And based on that, sometimes they also believe that our mocks are not as per that IIM's difficulty level. So I think that especially slot 3 quant and DILR should set such misinformation and rumors to rest, that there is
Absolutely.
absolutely no such pattern. All the IIMs are well capable of setting any difficulty level that they want to. We should be prepared for high, low, medium, everything.
The
So
only
our mocks are an absolute must for proper practice, proper preparation.
Absolutely, ma'am. Shana, ma'am, what you said is there's no such pattern the student should look for. I would extend that and say the only pattern that students should believe in is that hard work gives you results. You work hard, you get your results. That is a fixed pattern. And you work hard, you work with aimcats, you work with difficult aimcats, you work with aimcats, that gives you all the variations, because aimcats are do not only have difficult papers, aimcat have a lot of easy papers too, right? So work with the different difficulty levels that aimcats give you. Make sure that you prepare for the toughest paper, so that even if you are caught by surprise, you end up doing well, right? And there's one more thing that is coming across from the analysis that Shana ma'am and Devan sir gave us. Shana ma'am said that none of the passages are easy to read, which means that all the passages are difficult. Devan sir said all the 5 sets are difficult. And Devan sir said that the number of easy questions in quant are fairly low, which means that the quant section is also difficult, which means all the 3 sections in this slot are tougher compared to last year. And it looks like they are tougher compared to the morning slot sections, morning and afternoon slot sections also. So looks like those of you who took the exam in the 3rd slot maybe would have attempted much lesser number of questions. So do not lose hope because everybody else in the slot who has taken the test in the slot is in the same boat, which means there would be normalization that will kick in. You need not compare your number to say, I said I have attempted only X number of questions in the evening slot, and my friend has attempted Y, which is more than X in the morning slot, and Z, which is also more than X in the afternoon slot. You need not worry, because there is normalization which will take care of all this and ensure that regardless of your number of attempts, as long as you have answered the questions well, meaning the number comparison doesn't matter. There is normalization which can help you. So which is why we have made the percentile estimator available on our CAT website, timeforeducation.com/CAT2025. There is percentile estimator that is available, where you can instantaneously know what your estimated percentile is. All you need to do is input your number of attempts along with the expected accuracy. We only hope that the accuracy is in the high 80s, 90s. So input those 2 numbers and instantly get your estimated percentile range for your raw score, right? So take heart, those of you in slot 3, your lower number of attempts need not necessarily mean a lower percentile. All right. So there's lot more activity lined up for you this evening. There's a detailed analysis for each of the sections that is going to come up now. We'll start in a couple of minutes, and then we will have the overall cutoffs and comparison with the other slots discussion that we have. The first cut written analysis is already available on our website for the 3rd slot. Detailed analysis will be coming up in about an hour or so. Make sure you stay tuned to our YouTube channel, Time for Cat. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of activity lined up. There are multiple live videos which will keep providing you inputs all through the remaining 2-3 months in your CAT journey, how to prepare for GDPI, and various other things that are absolutely essential for you, right? So stay tuned to our CAT analysis page, timeforeducation.com/CAT2025. Time for CAT is our YouTube channel. Make sure that you like and subscribe to that. So I take this opportunity to thank Devan sir and Shana ma'am, who have joined us from Mumbai and Bhopal. Thank you very much, ma'am. Good night and all the best to you folks.